Welcome back to the Ostrich Running Podcast, where we embrace the long miles, the bad decisions, and the occasional moment of wisdom, usually by accident. Today, we got a great guest lined up for you. It's an individual who has a unique take on balancing fitness and screen time. But before we get into it, let's lace up, loosen up, and get ready to reevaluate all of our life choices. This is the Ostrich Running Podcast. Here we go. All right, today on the Ostrich Running Podcast, we're excited to welcome Garrett Eledui. Garrett is a husband, father of two, and a talented software engineer who's diving into the world of running. But that's not all. He's also the creator of an innovative app that encourages healthier habits by exchanging your exercise time for social media time. Genius, very genius. So we're going to go dig into Garrett's journey as an aspiring runner, the inspiration behind the app, and just all things Garrett for now, because we're really intrigued by this person. So Garrett, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you. Can you just go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit to our audience? Let them know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thanks so much for having me, guys. But yeah, like y'all said, so I am a software engineer by trade. I really have never been in much of the running world up until just a few years ago. I'm pretty sure, the longest I'd ever run before probably 2020 was, I think, probably a 5K, honestly. And my brother-in-law, he was into ultra running and in that world, which was at the time when he was first talking to me about it, was just an insane concept to me that people would run further than a marathon.
That's where I'm at, Garrett.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure this whole thing out. That's why I'm here. Yeah.
So the purpose of our show, right, is I'm kind of similar boat, right? I started about 2021, no running background, and then I just fell into the world of ultra running, similar to you, right? Jarrett, he thinks we're crazy. People like us are crazy.
I'm a soccer player like you too, Garrett.
Yeah.
That's about the most running that I did was for training, pretty much.
My goal is to eventually get this man to run an ultra.
Not gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. We're gonna get there. He thinks we're crazy. So but go on. Yeah, you were mentioning.
No, like you said, in the world of especially soccer or any type of field sport, I feel like growing up, running was used as a punishment for,
Right.
some
We
type
had to
of
run a mile before, or if you mess up or you did something wrong during a game, we had to run, 3 miles after that. I hated it.
Right. Yeah. And I remember, even when I would try to train running on my own, like while I was in soccer in high school, I would go out, I would run, and I'd just be running as hard as I can. And every time I'd end a run, I would just think about how much I hated it. And
Right.
everything about the running had to be associated with the fact that this is going to improve my performance. And it was all about delayed gratification in some capacity. And there was no joy in the activity itself. And so yeah, like when I was 16 years old when I ran my first 5K, my brother, who had started dabbling in triathlons, he was like, "Hey, you should come do this 5K with me." It was a super casual, like, our hometown 5K thing. And I remember starting the race thinking like, this is so far. I don't know if I could run this far. I'd never run that far in a race capacity before, even though probably on the soccer field, I'm sure that I'd clocked in those miles.
That's what I
do
tell
3
this
miles
guy
all the time.
I'm like,
But it's a different type of running.
it's more like a fartlek run,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So like you
Right.
sprint and then you slow down, sprint and slow down.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's what I tell him. And you play 3 to 5 times a week, right?
Yeah, right now, still, yeah.
So like he's in there and I'm like, what are you talking about, man? So it's something in the mind, right? That like
It's continuous running too. I think as a soccer player, our muscles are not made to just continuously run.
they are. It's in there.
Kind of, but anyway,
Yeah.
So he talks
Yeah.
you into so you run the
Yeah.
5K. Do you remember your time?
I think it was I want to say it was like 26 minutes, I think.
That's pretty
And
good.
so, and again, at the time, I had some friends, even in the soccer world, that were much more, competitive. I don't know if they were necessarily formally on cross country teams, but like
Mhm.
they're the guys knocking out like 19-minute 5Ks and stuff like that. And so
My mind.
when I would like see that they were like real runners, and obviously, especially at that age, I mean, even I feel like as you get older, but like especially at that age, I was like, I am definitely not a runner because these guys are the ones that are, clocking in
I
these
feel that.
crazy
I
times.
feel that because it's also hard when you look at all these people, and I think you mentioned in some of the questions that we had asked you earlier. You know, looking at our zone two, right? And looking at these individuals who are just 6 minute miles, and I feel like they're gliding, and I'm over here like trying to like struggle for this like 7 minute mile,
Right.
7.5 minute mile. And it's like, how do they do this? And something with like college, I've noticed a difference in college runners, right? They get that coaching. So I've always thought about like, do I need to get a coach? Maybe just somebody who can
Even
like
now.
even now I think about it. I think about it, but it's like it's an investment, obviously. And what am I really doing it for? Do I am I trying to win something or am I just trying to complete it? So you mentioned that after that 5K, you did a half marathon and then marathon, and you kind of increased. What was that transition like for you to go from punishment to enjoyment and to get those distances?
And also, real quick, what age did you do the half marathon? How long was it before?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think that was 2022. I'm pretty sure is when I did the half marathon. So this was just a couple of years ago, and
Yours, huh?
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, so like I said, my brother-in-law, who he was in the ultra world, he lives down in Tallahassee, and they were coming up to run a half marathon about an hour from where we lived, and he was like, "Hey man, you should come join us, like, come run it since we're close by." And I was like, I think at that point in time, it'd been years since I had really run for any formal capacity. Hadn't been training for soccer. I hadn't definitely wasn't running just for like the fun of it. And I think at the time I was just kind of like, all right, like, I'll just try this. Like, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, it's more just an activity to hang out with a family member kind of thing. And so yeah, I that we go out there, we start running, and my brother-in-law, I think I really thank him for a lot of the mindset that is where started to introduce me into the world of running. But when we were out there, if I got tired, like at whatever pace we were going, he was totally fine with like, hey, let's slow it down. And I think that really started unlocking something to me that I was like, and I think again, some with his personality and just kind of the way that he views running, but it was like really okay to go slower. And
Right.
I think that's when it started clicking with me that I was like, okay, you're still running, and enjoying this activity, and you don't have to be going like at your hardest pace
Right,
for
coming
it to
from the
be.
soccer world, that's how my mindset was too. It's like,
Yeah,
I need to be somewhere in the front of this group. So
exactly.
that was also a struggle.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
especially when you get passed up by the old people at the half marathons and
Right,
marathons,
right.
and you're
It's
like dying, and you're watching
you
them go.
can enjoy running, like,
yeah,
because me and you have actually kind of the same story. Is I was still playing soccer, but I just went out and did a half marathon without training for it, anything.
yeah,
So yeah, that was a eye-opening experience for me also.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think yeah, like a couple things that happened during it. Like there was this other kid who probably he had to been like 11 years old, and he was wearing a hoodie the whole time, and it was one of those like depending on which mile, we'd kind of be a little bit in front of him. He'd go in front of us, back and forth. And so me and my brother-in-law, and then my our wives, which are sisters, their uncle was running with us as well. But it became this joke that's like, we got to beat Hoodie Boy.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like
We
this
had a
kid who,
I had an older lady that was exactly the same thing. It was just I would sprint, beat her, but then she would just be doing the same pace, and then she would catch me every single time because I would sprint, slow down. So I was constantly trying to just beat her, and I think she actually beat me in it.
We always find our person in the race, right?
Right,
And it's usually like just to pass the halfway point when reality sets in. You're like, oh, I'm not doing too well. Who can I beat out here? The
Right.
competitive nature in us, right?
Yeah.
So you do the half marathon, and then you get up to the marathon pace. What was the transition from a marathon to an ultra? I mean, I know you have inspirations with people around you who've already been in that world. So how did you was it just something in you in that success of the half marathon that you're like, let me just try it?
Yeah,
Because for me personally, I was doing marathons, and in your algorithm, when you're searching a marathon training, then eventually ultras start coming up. I feel like they do that on purpose, by the way. I was like, what? 50 miles, 100 miles, 240 miles. This is
Toxic
crazy.
algorithm.
Yeah. So I was always like, how does somebody run another marathon after a marathon? That was just a big question for me. So then I just figured I'm going to try it. I'm going to push the limits. What was it for you that got you out of the marathon distance and into the ultra distance?
Yeah. So really, I think that the marathon was a similar thing with the half marathon where I was just like, okay, me and a buddy were like, let's go out and let's try to do this. And the entire time, yeah, it wasn't a formal race. It was just let's go out and run the distance.
yeah, which is even
And
crazier to me
Yeah, we saw
because
like
there's
your
no way
response.
I'm not doing that without getting a medal.
Yeah,
Like,
like
I'm not getting any. That's even more incredible.
so now you're just kind of playing into where he says we're crazy. Okay, so
yeah,
don't give him too much
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's
I mean,
like,
I have so many questions in the middle. Like, how did you feel after the half marathon? You know,
yeah,
did you
yeah,
feel because after I did mine, I was like, I'm never doing this again. So me and you went completely. We're on the same path, and now we have gone completely different directions. Where I'm like, I'm only doing 5Ks, and you're doing bigger and better things with.
well, yeah, I think that one of the big things for me was it was like identifying the point of failure in my body during the half marathon was a really interesting thing that led me to build the confidence further because the thing that was the point of failure during the half marathon, and we literally have footage like of me crossing the half marathon finish line, and I'm like literally hobbling because I was essentially getting like my tendons on the outside of one of my knees were basically just like giving out extreme pain,
Yeah.
tons of discomfort. But what was interesting is that like my calves and like, all of the muscles in my body felt pretty much fine at the pace I was going. The point of failure was something like ligament related. So
mm,
what that led me to believe was that like as long as I stay within this like pace, I think that it's just a matter of like training to adapt the ligaments. And so that was kind of a big eye opener for me. So, and basically, same thing happened again with the marathon distance. Is that me and my buddy were like, let's go out and just try it. And again, the same thing around like 13 miles. The knee was just killing me, and it was basically just like suffering for the last until we completed the half marathon distance. But I will say, when you talk about the algorithms, I mean, I can't remember if that was at that time, but one of the big inspirations for me has been Russ Cook, the AKA hardest geezer. I don't know if y'all have heard of them, but the guy that
yeah. We hadn't heard of him before you mentioned him, and so yeah, tell me a little bit about Russ.
yeah, so he basically, is kind of has a similar story to us. Like, had never really run formally, went out and did a half marathon with no training, and then just kind of went crazy. So long story short, he basically did this project that he just finished this past year, where he ran the full length of Africa from the tip of South Africa all the way up to Tunisia, and it took him like I can't remember it's almost a year, basically, of averaging
Oh my
a
God.
The fourth.
averaging over a marathon a day. He had a few days where he was hospitalized and then even got
Oh gosh.
kidnapped and all these wild stories.
He got kidnapped.
Yeah, yeah. You should definitely look him up because the
Is this a
stories are.
documentary?
Oh my
He has a whole series on YouTube about
Okay.
it, and then there's some podcasts that he's interviewed on. Anyways,
That's the first thing he said. He's like, he didn't get kidnapped or killed. And then I was like, no, I guess not. And so you said that. And yeah, okay. That makes
yeah.
sense.
This is inspiring you guys.
Well, so I
Yeah.
followed him on Strava during this project, and I would see him, and it's over the course of the year he did averaged over a marathon a day. But many of those days, like when he was healthy, he was doing 40 miles a day every
Mhm.
single day, and it started to really like rewire the way that I was thinking about what your body is physically capable of. And then again, it was one of those like you do like those runs and you'd be anywhere between like a 12 to 14-minute pace. And it started again kind of making me rethink about like what is a real pace that's legitimate for you to go out and do a run at. And so I think that's where when I went to go start exploring these further distance than the marathon, I
Yeah.
started thinking like, if people are physically capable of doing this, I think I probably could do it as long as I'm within a reasonable pace and as long as the structure of the skeleton is kind of holding up.
Yeah, yeah. No, so I have a similar experience too. There's a guy currently running the Transcon again. I don't know if you've seen him, Dead Scout
I haven't seen him, no.
yeah, so he's running from LA to New York for the second time, and he's running for mental health awareness, and he's averaging 50 miles a day, right? So he's going through that,
From
and
LA to New York.
LA to New York. But then the other thing is like he just did this last year. He just did this run last year. And I'm like, how is this guy even doing this again? So like I kind of got like nervous for him, but every day and you get these updates where he's like, the body's just not working. I had inspired by Andy Glaze.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen him, was how he's always doing these 100-mile weeks, right? So I'm training for my first 100-miler, which is the end of this month at Javelina 100. And part of my training was I was going to do a 100-mile week. So I did 20 miles a day for 5 days, right? And it was when we had that heat wave.
Yeah.
So it was like disgustingly hot. So I was doing 10 in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, 10 in the morning, 10 in the afternoon. And at 40 miles into that week, I was like, my body's done. And I just got out there and just put one foot in front of the other, did super slow pace. And then by the time I got to like mile 70 of the week, I hit this rush, right? Where I'm like, dude, I feel great. I'm just gonna run. I'm gonna run. I'm gonna run. So
Right.
your body just like triggers into this whole other, it taps into this like superhuman strength that you don't even know is there, right? And it's crazy. So, you know, other runners inspiring other runners. It's just this catalyst effect, and I'm gonna get it for you. You're gonna run a 50 miler. There's
Yeah.
gonna be we're gonna answer the question of why, right? I still don't know the question of why. Like I know that I've had
That's why we're doing this podcast.
yeah,
Somebody will explain it.
somebody's gonna have to explain it. Maybe this will be the
Yeah.
journey that we go through. Wondering why. Why do we do this? And so I think
Real
ahead.
quick, Garrett, were you training for like when you decided to jump up to the
Ultra.
no, to the marathon?
Oh, just the marathon.
Yeah, did you train before that, or are you just jumping in like?
So the marathon was, that was done with me and a buddy, and we
Right.
ran, I think maybe twice a week for about 2.5 to 3 miles. So basically, no. I said,
2 to 3 miles? Is that what you said?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But honestly, again, I don't recommend that for people to do something like that necessarily. But I feel like for people that really like, I think for me, it really started to unlock this thought of like you can do so much more than what your body is the feedback loop of your body is telling you
Right.
like this is the
Mhm.
stopping point. And I think that was helpful in a way. Again, like I don't encourage like going out and injuring yourself, which is basically what me and my friend
Yeah.
did.
Right.
But what it was really helpful was to see that like, okay, if you train for this much, you can actually go so much further. And I think every single time I've hit a new distance record, it's been like, oh wow, I probably could have trained a little bit more and I might have had some more readiness to get even further than I thought. But I think, if you've heard of like Courtney DeWalter's like whole mindset of like the pain cave, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you have all of this section of a race or a run that, you basically have prepared for and you feel good to. And then you get to this section of the run where it really starts becoming about chipping away at the inside of that pain cave and
Mhm.
expanding that to a capacity that you've never really realized before. And so again, I think again I think that it's so much your body is capable of doing so much more than you think, and it's a really interesting concept to explore. And anyways, that's
Yeah.
kind of
No.
That goes I mean, that goes hand in hand with life too. That's
Exactly.
yeah.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Mhm.
There's these moments, right, where you just you don't realize what you're capable of. And even like again, I don't recommend either on like no training to do that distance, right? But with that being said, after you've done it multiple times, the distance really isn't as far as you think. It's that mental barrier, right? Of oh man, how does a marathon, just the word marathon kind of triggers this like response in anybody's mind, like, oh, impossible distance, right?
Yeah.
And then as you go down this whole community, you see people are pushing those boundaries each and every time. And much like you said, Garrett, running slower and just running and not stopping, right? You can see what you're capable in that certain distance. And I like what you answered in one of our questions was like, what's one of your greatest accomplishments, right? And I love that you put a DNF 100 miler, right? And
Mhm.
I thought that was like awesome because you know DNFing is still an accomplishment, right? I have a similar DNF story of my
Answer
first.
did not finish. 'Cause
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah, yeah, he didn't know.
know.
So did not finish, right? And I had a 50 miler that I did, my first one. I had COVID right before, and they didn't want to refund me. So I
Ah,
said, all right, I'm going to try it. And 30 miles in,
I'm doing it anyway.
I'm doing it anyway. 30 miles in, I couldn't keep anything down, puked, right? And just I DNF'd and I was like, okay, I got to stop because I can't keep anything down. The next one that I did was, I was like, okay, I'm training. I'm going to be good. I'm ready to go. It was my next 50 miler, right? And I just barely make it out of the last aid station before the cutoff. And at that point, there's no turning around. You just got to go to the finish line because, there's nobody else there. Well, I missed my 50 miler cutoff time by 15 minutes. So I
Oh,
technically DNF, but I did the distance, right?
yeah.
So,
oh
and it just
no.
got better and better, right? But I think that it's important that people hear your DNF story and see that as an accomplishment because we see a lot of people. So, could you
Yeah.
expand just briefly on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, again, it's such a difficult thing immediately afterwards, and even for weeks afterwards for me to like bring myself to the thought of like, you get so fixated on a particular goal and to not meet that after at that time I felt like I had done a decent amount of preparation. But and especially DNFing on a 100-mile attempt and only making it halfway was like definitely a humbling experience for me, for sure. And but yeah, I mean, I think that in the weeks afterwards, it wasn't until a while later that I started thinking like, I just went like double the distance than I had ever gone before. At the time, I'd only done a marathon distance. And so
Aiming for
the
100, you made it to 50. Yeah.
And the fact that you went from a marathon to a 100 miler is is crazy.
yeah, yeah, I think I do have a little bit of an issue with some delusional
Right.
uh,
I think
I
as a
mean, that's
runner,
like
as an ultra runner, you have to have a little bit of
right.
delusional issues because you wouldn't put yourself in there if you had any kind of doubt, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think there is a sense in which that can be a powerful tool in your toolbox of things to accomplish. I mean, I think I've accomplished more from a running standpoint through delusion, I think, than I have through like you know complete perfect training plan with the exact nutrition and everything. And I think just a certain level of like, hey, I think we could really do this if we went out and attempted this is a very powerful concept.
Right. Just jump in there because I was telling him if I had to train for the half marathon, then I probably would have said I don't want to do this at all.
But I
Yeah.
think,
So that would be my mindset also. Like
yeah,
I would just I
it,
would need to go out there and maybe fail, like say I'm gonna run a 50 miler, finish the marathon,
yeah.
and then I'd be like, wow, I actually could do this, you know?
I have issues too in my myself. Like before I did my first marathon, right? I was like, oh, I don't want to fail in front of people, right? And I was like, well,
Yeah.
let me just see if I can do this, because I was stuck at the 18-mile mark during my whole training, right?
Mm.
So the week before my marathon, I went on my own in this little back bay and I ran the marathon distance on my own. And I was like, okay, well, you can do it. And then I had no idea like the recovery or anything like that. So then the following week I run the marathon again, only because I was like, I better not fail in front of people. I told everybody
Yeah.
I'm going to do this, right? Um, but it's it brings up another thing in that 100-mile race that you had. You said you had one of the strangest moments, or kind of surprising, and that was the emotional aspect. Can you tell me what happened in there?
Yeah, that was a crazy experience because, yeah, it was just after, again, the distance of the marathon, everything, every step beyond that was an unknown for how my body was going to react to the distance. And so I got to I think it was around mile 40. And this was like late December. I had started in the dark, ran all day long. It was dark again now. And I was really cold. And I think that I don't know what was really happening because I was super dialed in. I was locked in. I was still focused on the 100-mile goal. I had no intention of quitting. Quitting was just not even on the radar. But at one of the aid station stops that like my buddy and my wife were helping set up, I sat down and started eating, and I got just hit with this huge wave of emotions, and kind of it was almost scary because like there was nothing that triggered the emotion. There was no like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Like I didn't have any constant like any thoughts of doubt in the moment. It was just like my hormones were super out of whack.
Oh, wow.
And I felt like this need to cry for some reason.
Yeah.
That
Was it like a zen-like experience or
it was whatever it was very unpleasant. Like it
oh, it
felt
wasn't
like
good. Oh, okay.
no, it was very, like, uncomfortable, like I was losing control of something that
Ooh.
I thought that I could hold together, but again, it wasn't even like it'd be one thing if I was starting to get born out of, like, I am doubting myself or I'm doubting
Mhm.
that this will happen, but at the time, mentally, I was not even there yet. It was just like my body was starting to react to, like, "Hey, something with the hormones is really messed up, and were starting to react in all sorts of weird ways. And so and even actually after that happened, by the time I got to the 50, it was or I got to like mile 46 or so, and my buddy was just like, hey, I don't know if we should keep doing this. And
Yeah.
basically we made the decision to DNF at 50. Um, my wife was driving me home, and we were heading back to the house, and I was feeling like almost kind of like panicky, like almost kind of an
Mhm.
anxiety attack, which was like not something that I'd really had before. And so again, it was like as soon as my body was like stopped moving, all of this stuff within the systems in my body, I don't know exactly what was going on, but my body
That's
was
our
starting.
body trying to like tell us, "You're killing me. Stop."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it was to a point where I was like, yeah, that was very uncomfortable, like from some physiological aspects that I was unaware of was going to happen. And I
Mhm.
think through that, I did not have the best nutrition throughout the run. Again, I
Mm.
think my preparation could have been better. And so that's something that's again another piece of the puzzle that I'm starting to put together for future attempts is to be able to figure out, okay, I've gotten a lot of the ligament structures getting strong, doing lots of volume, but just being able to be on your feet for 10 plus hours, I think is something that I'm going to have to consider how that will fit into the puzzle
Yeah.
for solving another problem like that.
How did you feel the next day? Like, did you feel like
Surprisingly enough, I felt like the thing that I related it to was for the next 2 or 3 days, I felt like it just was after a really hard, rough soccer game.
you're
Oh,
I
okay.
I thought that I was going to really be like, you know, totally in bed. I couldn't move or anything like that. But honestly, I felt like after those 50 miles, getting up was just about like, I mean, it was definitely on the worst side of things, but it was like if you had a really, really rough soccer game where you're getting, knocked into people and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But it was very much localized to like the bottom half of my body. But yeah, honestly, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, yeah. It's the one thing that's like terrible for any like ultra distance that I've done is trying to sleep that night. Your body's just jerking awake and you feel
Yeah.
like you just cannot go to sleep at all. You're so tired that you just lay there awake like, ah, it's the worst.
Yeah.
well, I I think I'm kind of chasing like, is a weight lifted off you guys when you guys go from
Well,
like push yourself to that extreme?
Garrett,
Like, do
so
you feel something like, do you feel like lighter the next couple of days, like mentally, or
much like what Garrett said, right? Like this wave of emotion, right? I I'm a
because it almost sounds like what's that? Ad, that experience you go
out of
down.
body experience,
No,
like
but you go down and you like you.
the ayahuasca.
Yeah, it almost
Oh yeah.
seems like you guys are hitting that point sometimes.
So yeah, like when you mention that that wave of emotion, right? I'm kind of like a very detached person, like not emotional, and emotion kind of makes me feel awkward and weird displaying emotion. I'm not a crier. I've always was like even when my kids were born, I was like, dang, I think I was supposed to cry when they were born, like is something wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
So like, and then I'd see all these marathon runners like crying after they do the finish line, right? So then I think I was kind of chasing like to tap into that emotional connection, right? So I went and I did the marathon. I'm like, dang, I didn't have that emotional response. I was like, well, maybe a 50 miler, I'll feel that emotional response, right? And then it didn't really happen. And then I'm like, maybe a 100 miler? Am I going to
Okay.
run into this like? So I have had moments though now, like training for this 100 mile, where like I feel like I don't know if it's like I wanna cry, but, like, I feel this bliss and this, like, pain and scaredness, or, like, this fear kinda overtake, and there is a rush of emotion that kinda comes in some of these runs, especially if not you because you're crazy and you don't run with a playlist or anything, you run in silence, which blows his mind
Yeah,
too,
that's
right?
amazing.
Sometimes I have, like, a song just, like, that'll hit and it'll strike a chord, I'm like, "Oof, okay, yeah." That feels, like, really emotional in that point, but, I feel like that's my purpose is I'm trying to chase this, like, emotional
So you want what other
response.
people are
Yeah, I
doing.
kind of find some like I'm a little bit jealous, I'm like,
Mm,
dang, I think my body's probably looking for a good cry, but it's not it's just
yeah.
not gonna find it. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I don't know. So, you
yeah. I feel
know,
like there's a lot that, especially with, I mean, the way that you can accomplish things athletically, especially post like your 20s and stuff like that.
Right.
There's a lot of things that you can continue to build that increases your strength, all these different aspects of your athletic capability. But there is something about running for a distance that you never thought was possible before that I feel like unlocks kind of like a new understanding of what is possible for you, and
yeah.
I think that,
Yeah, even
um,
my half marathon after I was done, I mean, that whole day did feel painful and blissful at the same time.
yeah,
Like, everything was brighter for me that day. But, I mean, I didn't train at all, so
Yeah, you were
yeah.
high.
Yeah,
You got a
there
runner's
was
high.
a runner's high for sure.
And you see a lot, look, there's a lot of people who join the running community who are recovering addicts, gone through a lot of trauma. I am a recovering addict, alcoholic, and I kind of found running in maybe to fill that gap, and maybe that is my addictive personality going above and beyond to go into these
Well, you
extremes,
might
right?
be
To
just
feel,
getting that bliss, like you
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's good, so that actually kind of brings me into where, why we have you on here too. I mean, you have a great story, a great background. I feel like we have similar, even with both of us, like
Mhm.
backgrounds and experiences in getting into running. So, you know, getting into this project that you're currently working on now, how did that idea start? What is it? Explain to our listeners exactly what it is, the name and what you're doing with that.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm building an app right now that basically allows you to access 1 minute of social media for every 1 minute of time that you log in a fitness app, so
Mhm.
Strava or Nike Run, whatever it may be. And it doesn't necessarily have to be social media. A lot of these new screen time management apps, probably a lot of folks are familiar with, but you can select which apps that you want to block. But essentially, the idea is to, yeah, block out distractions and exercise more. But really, it kind of originated out of the idea that when I started increasing a lot of my training volume throughout the week for running, running in particular is just something that takes a ton of time when you're training.
Right.
And that was something that started frustrating me. I was like, this should take so much time. But when I started looking at like my screen time analytics, I was like, I spend still more time on social media, waste like distraction apps that throughout the week than I do when I'm actually, training. And
Mm.
obviously, the amount of physical effort that it takes to go run for like several hours throughout the day, it's, unrealistic to just jump right into it. But I
Yeah.
thought to myself, like, if I could build up my training volume to be able to hit basically the same amount of time that I spend on social media, which depending on the week can be, anywhere from 1.5 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. If you could hit those, you know, amount of time with training every single day, what could you be capable of in a
Yeah.
single ultra distance event? And obviously, like when you're doing your 100-mile week, if you're doing 20 miles a day, that's a significant amount of time.
It is.
Um, and so, obviously, the idea isn't so much to be earning screen time, so much it is to be able to be more aware of how much time you're balancing on, maybe social media distraction versus
Yeah.
training. And again, I also recognize for a lot of people, they're commuting on the way to work or doing something, they're taking a little break, they're on their phone. Again, that's not really so much the people that I'm, targeting this to. It's more
Yeah.
like people for myself where it's like I just sat on the couch for an hour
Yeah,
scrolling
you're not
when
even aware of it,
Yeah.
like how
Yeah.
much time you're taking.
Yeah, like 4 hours can pass of just doom scrolling, right?
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
my wife's gonna make me earn my training time, so we just won't talk too much about this. She's like, "You wanna go run for 8 hours a day, you better do something around here to earn that, so
Right.
don't create that app, okay?"
Yeah.
It's almost the same thing.
Yeah, and obviously, like, I'm not here to like influence. I think is just such a great idea, but I wonder even if you have tiers for people, right? Like, do you want to go the elite runner aspect where it's minute for minute, or to entice people a little bit more, do an hour, get 3 hours, something like for the amateur, the novice runner, right? So they
Yeah.
want to use that app a little bit more, right? Because a minute for minute is strong commitment, right? So maybe
Yeah.
different tiers of advanced runners, novice runners, something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
There's so many
Yeah,
Yeah,
different
but
I've
ways.
been exploring lots of different options. I've definitely heard other people mention a similar thing, and so it definitely is going to be one of those things I might need to iterate on it, get user
mhm,
feedback and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it, honestly, with the minute for minute initial idea was kind of built for a kind of marketing first approach. So
okay.
this is I've had multiple different business efforts that I've tried to start over the course of several years,
We need to
and
get you
many
on the fool's path.
many of them have been kind of failures. I started like back in 2018. I built a iOS app that was like a food finding app that was supposed to be used for when you're traveling to a new area and you're looking for restaurant suggestions, and it suggests it in a particular way. And that was something that started kind of showing some initial promise, and we started kind of partnering with restaurants to sell, ad space and stuff like that.
Mhm,
But then 2020 hit, and our user base kind of
mm,
disappeared. People weren't, searching for restaurants. And then after that, I tried to build an inventory software solution, and I was trying to sell that kind of on the phone and stuff like that. But I wasn't super passionate about it. And inventory software had been built a million times already, and it was kind of hard to figure out how to market the product. And
yeah,
so through a couple other projects, eventually I've come to this conclusion. I'm like, okay, what is something that I can build that almost is more of a marketing first approach? And I was thinking, like, at the time I'm getting into running. I am enjoying that. I feel like as I was consuming lots of running content on social media, I was like, there's a lot of this content that is fairly low cost to produce,
mhm,
Right.
and you can do it consistently because the activity is consistent. So if there's a way that I could build something within that industry, that would be interesting. And then the idea about like how can I increase my training and decrease my social media time.
yeah,
Um, and then the 1 minute for 1 minute thing was really kind of just taking an extreme approach at it, but also I was thinking about like virality ideas, social media ideas, and things
yeah,
that could potentially get marketed well. And basically, how could maybe that one for one concept be something that has a good hook to it, essentially? So
yeah,
Right.
I've kind of taken this project on a totally different approach than my previous projects of really trying to market it first and then figure out how that product can fit into the audience. Which, because I am the software developer and I have the ability to, pivot the product pretty quickly,
Yeah.
I think is kind of a unique standpoint. So we'll see how it works. Again, at this
I
point,
think
I
it's a
feel like
great idea, man. I
I think
really do. I
I think
think
it's really great for kids too.
100%.
Like
Yeah.
100%, you're like, you have to train, you have to do this to earn your social media time.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think that is
Yeah. It's great.
right.
I mean, so we also play soccer with these, we're going to call them younger kids. They're about 18 years old. Right. And sometimes we talk to each other. We're like, dude, how is it that we can keep up with these young kids? I was like, I would have destroyed somebody my age when I was like that young. And we also feel like this new generation is not out and about like when we used to, like how we used to be when we were younger. And maybe this is that shift, right? Where you can kind of get somebody off or at least earning some
Right.
time.
That's why I feel like a lot of these players can play even longer, like LeBron. I know he's
Yeah.
an exception. He can play till 40, but he grew up with no social media
Riding
as
bikes and
much, you know what
drinking
I mean?
garden hose water, you know?
And
yeah,
and to be a professional athlete, those just an hour a day consistently
Yeah.
training, it makes it such a huge difference.
Yeah.
So, like an app like this would be so good for
And you
kids.
could still even accomplish it with, other sports. Like I'm played 3 hours of soccer today or this week, I got,
Yeah,
I got 3 hours of social media time. And
right.
and really it's pretty good. And I like that, you're finding something. This is similar to how I started Ostrich Running, right? Um Jarrett, my guy over here, not only does he juice the running, we call him the juice. He'd always want us to find something we're passionate about, and I was doing all similar approach, all these other different business ideas, things that really had nothing to do with what I was doing on a daily basis. And it wasn't until it finally clicked where he's like, "Dude, you spend so much time running. Why don't you do something with running, right?"
Right.
And I think it's just when you spend that amount of time and you're passionate about it, you find these other people in this community who are similar positions, and that's all you need to do is find that solution to the problem for the people in your community. And there's a lot of us, and it's growing.
Right.
And I think the support from the community is all around, whether it's apparel, whether it's apps, it's just social media, it's marketing. It's a great community of people. And I was really happy that it made it in my algorithm, and I found you. So I think it's just awesome.
yeah, man, I'm so glad, and I really hope that it really unlocks the idea for people that you know the time that they have available, if they could utilize it for something simple, like even if they're not ready to dive into running, if it's the ability to go out and move and walk and get movement into their body opposed to scrolling, I feel like it can really benefit people from a lot of different aspects there. But I think, especially for those that might have doubts on their ability to run a marathon or an ultra marathon, I think that if
5K.
they
Hmm.
Mhm.
if they can realize with the amount of time that they spend doing one thing, if they could replace that with some training, I like I think this is something I might even try posting on social media with, but because I'm starting to get convinced, maybe by delusion again, but that if I could replace my screen time each week, or social media screen time with running, could I run 100-mile ultra by just simply replacing my screen time with running?
Oh
Or,
wow.
building up to that point,
I mean,
obviously.
if you just replace 30 minutes of your screen time with walking,
Yeah.
that would make such a huge difference to so many aspects
Yeah.
of that person's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever
It
need a
just
beta tester, just send it to me and I'll
Yeah,
run and, and I'll see how much I get unlocked.
absolutely.
But I really like the idea of it. But you're right. Uh,
there's so many lessons to learn from you guys in running and like pushing yourself.
yeah,
This app would be
it's
huge just
huge.
to change an hour of someone's day. I mean,
Yeah. Yep. And even if you're not getting like, I mean, you can only benefit from less screen time, right?
yeah,
You can only benefit, and
right.
it doesn't matter if it's an hour or whatever, but
Yeah,
you know you can only benefit from it. And
right.
I think it's just it's awesome. We wish you the best of luck with that app. I hope you keep us updated,
Yeah,
on anything that you have going on in the future with it. Like I said, I'd love to test some stuff with you, and then offline, I'd like to maybe get a mailing address. I could send you some of our running stuff,
Yeah.
and
100%, man.
when's your next race? Do you have any other races coming up?
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't have any formal races. Again, I had the
You're
thought of
crazy.
trying.
That which is even more mind blowing to me that you're not even getting a medal at the end. That's why you're so inspirational.
Well,
Also, that uh
I kind of think it was maybe a little bit what you were mentioning there. I think there's a sense in which like I'm a little scared to like, commit in the sense
Yeah.
that like, what if I do fail in a formal setting? And I think there's a
Mhm.
sense in which like if I fail on my own, that's kind of just, between me and myself, I guess. And so,
Yeah.
I think selfishly, I think it's a little bit of protecting my pride, but um I do feel like that I mean there's also the aspect when you get into the long distance ultras, a lot of the crew support is just, your own crew that
Yeah.
the
Do
benefits
you
of it.
have a crew that run this is what I tell him too, like, so all of my ultra distances, I don't have any pacers or crew, like, because it's so hard for me to I mean,
and
especially when he's my friend, I don't have a whole lot of runners that will run that distance with me,
right, and you're not getting any pacers.
and I'm not getting any pacers, so, I have to figure out how to do it on my own, and, yeah, so,
Yeah, no, it was great. I had my wife and a buddy of mine crewed me on my 100-mile attempt, and then I had some friends that were willing to pace with me for a good majority, probably over 75% of the run, and that was absolute game changer. Absolutely loved it. Um, and then yeah, for the most recent run, I did a 50K with a friend, and yeah, we kind of just built the aid stations along where his house was, and then we dropped a car at one spot, and we kind of just sort of looped back around and sort of did the same thing over and over again. So yeah, I mean, again, kind of whatever makes it work, but I think also like when for him, he was like we can't do it on Saturday because my daughter's got a birthday party, and and I was
yeah,
like, yeah, well,
right.
I can't do it this weekend because other family stuff. So with the responsibilities of dads, we were like, okay, it looks like Friday night, 6 p.m. That's when we're gonna try this, and we'll just run past like midnight.
Yep.
And we are like, I guess we'll just do that because that's kind of the time that that works for us. And so I wouldn't have, I would have, probably had the best Friday night I could have had with just running with my buddies
Right.
Yeah.
till
Yeah,
midnight.
that's the
So
hardest thing, right? Like, having kids, so, like, I do a lot of my training runs because super early in the morning,
mm,
4 or 5 in the morning, especially for longer distances, because you know, if you're out there running while your wife needs help with the kids, then, you're not gonna hear the end of it, right?
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. So I often have thought about that when we had finished that run, it was past midnight, and me and him were like, all right, like let's get back home because there's no excuse when we wake up in the morning. We're on dad
Dude,
duty.
yeah.
And I was like, yeah, how nice would it be to be, some like 20-year-old kid who's like gets to go back and sleep until noon the next day. It's like
I know, right?
not for us. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, Garrett, man, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. Let's keep in touch. I'd like to get some updates. I wish you the best, and I know you'll sign up for one of these races, and I'll make sure that I keep an eye out for you
yeah,
crossing that finish line of a official 100 miler because you deserve a medal, man. I
appreciate
mean,
it,
everything
man.
you've been doing is great, and I wish this app the best of luck. We'll be following it. And yeah, Jarrett.
Where can people find you, Garrett?
Yes.
Yeah, so just search for my name on Instagram. Garrett Eledui.r is technically my running account, and yeah, the app does not have a name yet. I hope that by the time that this podcast is live, that it's available on the App Store. But I've not decided on a name yet. But if you go to my social media, I'll have it linked in my bio. So be sure to check that.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, Garrett, you have a great rest of the week, man. And let's keep in touch. Okay.
Yeah, see you,
Thanks,
man.
guys. Appreciate your time.
See ya.